Today, we will take a look at a hand featuring one of my favorite poker players in the world, Patrik Antonius, where he is at the final table of a $25,000 buy-in Triton Poker Tournament, and he makes bottom pair.
6.4 million in the middle, just 3.5 behind Brick City for Patrik.
Antonius has got bottom pair. Can he make the call for the sickest hand of this tournament?
Tanking for this long with bottom pair.
I've seen Antonius make sick calls, but this would be absolutely madness if he can do it.
Let's get to it.
Yes,
Wait, you can still vote?
Yeah, apparently. I'm gonna start voting too. Oh, my name's not there. Never mind. So 14 million. It's a lot of chips, but you know, Antonius at one point had 14 million with many more people. You know, he's not he's got a lot less chips now. Open. Jack deuce suited over to Antonius. 15 blinds. Playable enough?
Yeah, I mean,
It's that suitedness, right? It's just like, yeah, can never be wrong technically, especially from a chip EV point of view. I was thinking about it because it's not the best playability. Here we go.
In this hand, Mustafov is playing with the big stack, and Steve O'Dwyer and Patrik Antonius both have relatively short stacks with about 15 big blinds, so they're not working with a whole lot. Mustafov raises it up from the button, as he should do, very, very wide in this scenario, and with the Jack 2 of hearts in the big blind, I think defending is fine. If this was offsuit, you would definitely let it go, but you can't really fold suited hands in this scenario, even hands as bad as Jack 2 suited from the big blind, closing the action, 15 big blinds deep, getting great odds against a range that should be very wide. You are going to find yourself in a lot of very difficult spots after the flop, but I think you probably have to see the flop, as Antonius does.
2.2 million out there.
Deuce. But 2 overs, gut shot, aggression.
One would assume we're going to see a turn card, Randy Mustafov, with the gut shot on 2 overs, Antonius bottom pair.
7.
And backdoor hearts connecting with this 7-6 deuce flop. Missing a 1/3 c-bet from Fahredin.
This pot could get dicey on the turn. Antonius, with this stack size, probably will be calling.
3.6 million in the middle.
We have an interesting spot in this episode of Weekly Poker Hand where Antonius flops bottom pair, marginal kicker, and Mustafov with his 10-8 on the 7-6-2 board has 2 overcards and a gut shot straight draw, which is pretty good. This is a spot where I presume Antonius is going to check every time. He probably does not want to have much of a leading range in this scenario, even though he is somewhat shallow stacked because of the payout implications. He'd much rather just not be all in with any hand that's not incredibly premium, if at all possible, so that he has a chance to move up the payout ladder. And I expect Mustafov, on the other hand, to be very aggressive in most scenarios because he wants to apply maximum pressure to Antonius. So whenever you flop 2 overcards and a gut shot, you're probably going to end up triple barreling off. I think this is a very, very standard spot for Mustafov to bet the flop, probably keep betting the turn, and probably jam the river pretty much no matter what it comes out, unless it like double pairs the board or something like that. So this is a spot where you should expect Mustafov to be pretty aggressive with his exact 10 high type of hand. So Antonius checks, Mustafov goes for a small bet, which I think is perfectly fine, over to Antonius with his bottom pair Jack kicker. You know, you're not folding. I don't think you want to check raise, because if you check raise and get substantial action, you're usually in pretty bad shape, or against a decently high equity draw. So I think this is a spot where Antonius should check every time, as he does. Mustafov should bet every time, as he does. And Antonius should find a call, as he does. Let's move on to the turn.
We head to the turn. Queen of Hearts rolling off over card to the flop. Potentially a card that Mustafov is going to continue barreling on. Little does he know, Antonius not going anywhere. So he's turned a flush draw.
A little bit tempting the multi-barrel.
1,400,000.
1.4 million. Antonius with a hand that can definitely check call again.
Any merit to check jamming this turn and just...
Possible, but I don't think you'll get a better hand to fold.
For sure.
But you can definitely be charging hands that have equity like this 10-8, 2 clubs.
Rather than playing the guessing game on a brick river where, you know, you get to the river with bottom pair.
The turn brings the very, very interesting Queen of Hearts, because now Antonius has a flush draw in addition to his bottom pair. He checks, as he should with his entire range in this scenario, because Antonius is not going to have a whole lot of hands containing a queen in this spot, because a lot of hands containing a queen that did not just make 2 pair are going to fold out to the flop continuation bet, like Queen 9, for example, would just fold to the flop continuation bet. So Antonius checks, as he certainly should, and I think this is a great spot for Mustafov to bluff, because, like I just said, Antonius doesn't have a whole lot of queens, but, very importantly, Mustafov does have a lot of queens. He's going to raise with a whole lot of hands containing a queen before the flop, and he's going to continuation bet a lot of those on the flop, meaning he has a lot of queens in the spot, which allows him to continue bluffing very frequently, plus the fact that there is immense payout pressure on Antonius. So he does go for the 1.4 million bet into the 3.6 million pot, which I think is fine and reasonable. I might have gone a little bit smaller just to give myself plenty of room to jam the river, because notice if you go 1.4 on the turn and Antonius calls, Antonius will have 3.5 remaining into a 6.4 million pot going to the river, so he may feel somewhat pot committed with a lot of his marginal 1-pair hands. But whatever, I definitely like Mustafov's bet in this spot. Let's see how Antonius responds.
Yeah, a lot of merit. Generally speaking, you'd be check jamming a little bit more often if you can get better hands to fold. You know, if you were...
See what he comes with facing the 40% turn barrel. Check call kind of feels, I don't know, really dicey. We get to the river, bottom pair, have some fold equity. Let's just push our equity now, you know, if we get called, we have emergency outs. Curious to hear what the viewers at home think Patrik should do.
Call. No, call.
You said call.
$6.4 million in the middle, just 3.5 behind.
Facing this 1.4 million bet, a lot of people get it in their heads that their only options are to shove or fold. But calling is a very viable option, which is exactly what Antonius does. In this situation, if you shove and get called, you're usually going to be in pretty bad shape, drawing to a flush or 2-pair or 3 of a kind. But if you check and call, you keep your opponent in the pot with all of their bluffs. And in this scenario, Mustafov should have a ton of bluffs. And a lot of the bluffs are going to be relatively low equity. Now, I do realize that quite often the bluffs are going to have 15% equity or 20% equity, maybe even more if they have some sort of very good draw with them. But this is an excellent spot to check and call, because while you will get outdrawn some portion of the time, you really, really, really want to keep your opponent in with their low equity hands, which Antonius realizes. So he does go for the check and call. Let's see what happens on the river.
Ace of diamonds on the river. Brick City for Patrik.
Can he barrel again with 10-8 high? It's unlikely for Antonius to hit the ace. A lot of these hands of ace could rejam pre-flop hypothetically.
All in.
All in with 10-8
Wow,
high.
gangster.
And Antonius has got bottom pair. Can he make the call for the sickest hand of this tournament?
Huh?
The river brings the ace of diamonds. Antonius has bottom pair. He checks, And over to Mustafov with his 10 high on a relatively scary board for Antonius. This is just an easy all-in. It is worth noting that in this scenario, Mustafov should be betting much wider than only an ace on the river. A lot of people in this spot, if they have a queen or perhaps even a 7, they just always check it back. But if you think about the way this hand is played out, Antonius should have almost no aces or queens in his range because he would shove a lot of ace high before the flop, given he was only 15 big blinds deep, and he would have check folded a lot of the queen highs on the flop. So this is a spot where I think if Mustafov has a hand like a 7, especially a decent 7, maybe like Jack 7, he should probably go for a shove, which a lot of people do not do. And when he starts going that wide for value, it allows him to have plenty of bluffs, and obviously he has a lot of unpaired hands in this scenario. So he should be bluffing some portion of the time. And I think of hands you want to bluff, the 10 high is a pretty nice one because if it goes check on the river, your 10 high is basically never good. And every once in a while, Antonius is going to have a hand like some random king high or some random jack high, probably with a flush draw or something like that, that would end up winning. So this is a spot where Mustafov has a really, really easy all-in, and that's exactly what he does. Let's see if Antonius can call off for all of his money with the bottom pair.
Antonius hasn't, like, insta-mucked his hand. You know, the sickest thing, Randy, is as soon as Fahredin moved all in, Antonius just kind of gave him the side eye, just tanking for this long with bottom pair.
Really have.
Trying to get a read out of Ferry. I guess one of the main concerns, Randy, is calling and Ferry bluffing with, like, I don't know, a 6x of hearts. Does he ever just knuckle those back?
Nice.
Yeah, it is a consideration.
Staring him down.
I have one more left. Then I'm dead. Okay.
You do have one more left, Patrick, and your hand will be deemed dead if you're given a countdown.
Crunch time.
It really is.
Can he make the call?
After tanking for this long, Ferry coming with the 1/3 on the flop.
Good call.
1/3 on the turn, and he makes the call. Randy, are you kidding me?
After a long time deliberating, Antonius finally makes the call and wins a big pot. And you may look at this spot and think, how in the world can Antonius find a call here? Well, if you think about the range that Mustafov has, it probably does not contain a whole lot of ace-x, because a lot of those would open shove before the flop for 15 big blinds effective against the small blind and big blind. And if he did not shove before the flop, he probably would have checked on either the flop or the turn, just looking to realize the showdown value. So this is a spot where Mustafov's not going to have too many ace-x, at least not all the ace-x. And, very importantly, a lot of players do not go for thin enough value in this spot, which means maybe they're only betting with a queen or better. Now, I don't know anything about Mustafov. I'm going to presume he's world-class because he's playing at the final table of a $25,000 buy-in Triton tournament. So he probably is value betting wide enough. But, very importantly, a lot of players in these scenarios drastically overbluff because this board, when it runs out 2 overcards to the flop on the turn in the river, it's very, very easy for Antonius to have a 7, a 6, or 2, and all of those are pretty marginal bluff catchers in this situation. So, Mustafov, realizing he has a lot of queens in his range, maybe some aces, maybe some good 7s, gets to bluff a ton. And when I say a ton, I do not mean every time, but a lot of people will bluff every single time. So this is a spot where if Antonius thinks that Mustafov is a little bit overly aggressive, and if he will take far too many bluffs, Antonius should find more hero calls than normal. And when you find more hero calls than normal, quite often that means any sort of pair. And Antonius does it, and he wins a gigantic pot, which led later to him winning the entire tournament for about $800,000. I don't know if I would have made that call. You know what? I want you to be honest. In the comment section below, write, would you have found the call with the bottom pair for all your money at the final table? Dicey spot, that's for sure. That's me for today. Congrats to Antonius. Good luck in your games. Have fun. And if you hero call, well, sometimes you win and sometimes you lose.